everyone. Good morning and good evening to those of you joining from Zoom and LinkedIn. I see we still have a number of attendees rolling in, but we'll just get started. Happy St. Patrick's Day as well to those of you who celebrate. My name is Dylan Heen, and I'm the manager for sustainability and development here at the US-ASEAN Business Council. And I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's Fireside Chat with Mary Draves, Chief Sustainability Officer at Dow, and USABC President and CEO, Ambassador Ted Osius. To provide just a little bit of background to those of you who are just joining this series now, the CSO Fireside Chat series is a conversation series with leading Chief Sustainability Officers that we began last November with a really great kickoff conversation with Laura Lane, Chief Sustainability Officer at UPS ahead of COP26. We were also honored to host Dr. Gail Schuler, Chief Sustainability Officer at 3M earlier this year for a conversation focused mainly on innovations in sustainability technology. But today we are thrilled to welcome another experienced sustainability practitioner, Mary Draves, to discuss her life, her current experience leading sustainability for Dow, and lessons learned from her career. Today's conversation with Mary really couldn't come at a better time. We're proud to be working with Dow in their capacity as co-chair of the Council's Sustainability Committee, engaging with governments in Southeast Asia to combat plastic waste pollution, explore new investments in innovative new waste management technologies, and help build a circular economy across the region. So Mary, thank you again to you and to your colleagues for supporting the Sustainability Committee's important work in Southeast Asia.
Dylan, thank you very much.
Following the discussion today with Ambassador Osius and Mary, we will move to a Q&A portion. If at any time you have questions for our speakers, please submit them in the chat box, and we will try to get to those at the end of the program. And as I said at the beginning, please note today's program will be live streamed on LinkedIn and recorded as well. So thank you all again for joining. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Ambassador Osius for some opening remarks. Ted, over to you.
Dylan, thank you very much. And hello to everybody, whether you're joining in the morning here in the United States or in the evening in ASEAN or live on LinkedIn, or even if you're seeing this recorded a few days from now. It's really a pleasure to be here today with Mary Draves, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Dow, and with all of you who are joining for today's discussion. Now, for those of you who don't know her, I'm going to provide a brief introduction of Mary before turning the floor over to her for some brief opening remarks, and then we'll move into a Q&A. As Chief Sustainability Officer at Dow, Mary is passionate about using science, innovation, and collaboration to drive transformative and sustainable change. She's responsible for corporate environment, health, and safety, governance, and corporate sustainability, including the reporting and disclosure of Dow's environment, social governance, or ESG performance. Mary is focused on advancing Dow's sustainability agenda through collaborative partnerships, and she was instrumental in shaping Dow's new sustainability targets to address climate protection and advance a circular economy. Building on the company's 2025 sustainability goals, these targets put Dow on a path to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, to eliminate plastic waste in our environment, and to increase its positive impacts on society. Previously, Mary led Dow's groundbreaking Valuing Nature goal, which represents the first ever commitment by a corporation to formally factor nature into its business decisions. I know this point will be important to our discussion today, and you'll hear what Mary's thinking was behind all of this. Under her leadership, Dow has enjoyed a highly productive 10-year collaboration with the Nature Conservancy. As a big fan of the Nature Conservancy, I love this. Together with TNC, Mary and her team have helped pioneer tools and created a cultural shift that is enabling Dow sites to make a compelling business case for adopting nature-based project solutions. Dow's aim is to identify $1 billion worth of value to Dow from projects that enhance nature by 2025. This is ambitious. Since launching the goal in 2015, the company has realized more than 500 million of net present value in nature-based decisions. So on track. Mary joined Dow in 1989. She's held several manufacturing and EH&S leadership roles throughout her impressive career. During her years at Dow, she has built a reputation for being an effective and a collaborative leader who helps inspire commitment in her teams and attain results. So Mary, I'm really honored to be with you today. I'm excited about our discussion. I'm grateful to you for spending time with us. And I wonder if before we have an exchange, if you would share just some initial thoughts to get us going.
Sure. And Ambassador, I really am excited to be here today. The opportunity to talk to your, the ASEAN Council is really one that I do cherish, and I do appreciate the invite. So thanks to everyone who's joined today. And I know for some of you, it's very late in your evening. So thank you very much. I mean, for Dow, sustainability is part of everything that we do. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. There is no more important time than right now to be focused on sustainability. I think if the last 2 years have taught us anything, and we were talking before we started today about, how a global pandemic has maybe adjusted our thinking, but it's also accelerated the need for us to take action and to do very tangible things to combat issues like climate change, plastic circularity, and the list goes on and on. So I think being part of Team Dow and watching Dow over the last, its whole history, 125 years, and now really over the last maybe 3 to 4 now decades, take a leadership position has really been a true honor and a privilege. So I'm excited today to share a little about what we're doing in the ASEAN region, and also about how we think about sustainability right now.
Thank you, Mary. Let's start with you. How did you end up leading sustainability at Dow? What was this part of your plan, or did you just end up there?
Well, no, I had never really thought about what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go work. And ironically, I started at Dow as a student employee. I was an intern and a cooperative education student before I started with them full time. And really, truthfully, I was really more interested in the economic benefits of working for Dow than I was really about, what Dow was doing. I've had the unbelievable privilege to have so many roles in the company, learning about research and toxicology, environmental health, safety, manufacturing, government affairs, public policy. And you just really started to see, Dow's commitment to all of these things, and really its commitment to contributing positive to society. Eventually, my passion in the environmental space really led me to the CSO role. And you mentioned the Nature Conservancy, and we can talk a bit about that. But that goal, the nature goal, really sparked my desire to hopefully one day be the Chief Sustainability Officer. And I was offered the role in late 2018 and started in that role in 2019, really standing on the shoulders of giants, others in the company who had really been instrumental in making a change. I think that the idea that sustainability is now part of everything that we do has become, really, kind of an important part of who we are and what we are. And for me also, I grew up on a farm, right? And on a farm, everything becomes part of a sustainable ecosystem. So when I can translate to how I grew up into what I do at work, it's a really great marriage.
Love that. I know you live in Michigan now. Where's the farm?
Well, actually, my grandparents had a dairy farm when I was growing up. I know I'm a hobby farmer, and I just built kind of a new farm, I should say. So I have a greenhouse, and I have some animals that I'll add to my ecosystem here over the course of the next several months. So it's just right out my front door. It's about 60 feet from my front door. So that's where the farm is. Yeah.
So it's an ongoing endeavor.
Yes.
And listen, what you said about starting as an intern, I hope if there are any interns out there, this should be an inspiration that sometimes an internship is a long interview for a job, and those who get, run the gauntlet as interns get to do great things. It sounds to me like for you, sustainability is pretty core to who you are. What it even elicits a kind of an emotional reaction. What does it mean to you personally to talk about sustainability?
Yeah, I think right now, like I said, I grew up in a farm, and that ecosystem is circular and it's very sustainable. I think fast forward to today, and that's really the same is true. I mean, we are consuming resources at a rate that isn't congruent, and it doesn't match up with what the world is able to maintain, or really what the earth is really, frankly, able to support. And I think for me personally, it's like how does the way I live, or how do we live as a family, really help that? And and here's where my kids challenge me. You and I have spoken about our children. I have a 22-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old son, and they're pretty adamant. The planet isn't going to be what they want it to be, unless we do some change, right? And so they really are leading lives that I'm pretty proud of, but they're also very sustainable. My son supports himself through a recycled business, right? He actually sells vintage clothing. I mean, so, the kid very, very rarely buys anything new. Our daughter is in the agricultural space, and, she's looking at how do we grow plants that, yield more and use less. So they are both firmly entrenched in the sustainability of their life. That's part of who they are and what they do. They get it. They act very differently. And, I think that's really what we need and what we continue to need. And Dow looks at things that way too, right? I mean, we look at everything that we do to say, okay, how can we advance our thinking, use less, create more value? It's not just about, producing plastic pellets, but how do we do that in a manner that, we can have more recycled content? How do we get to zero carbon emissions? And that's for us as a business imperative, right? And so for me, I mean, it's core and it's fiber to our being. And I think that work makes us relevant. You don't talk about sustainability now, you become irrelevant.
I love that. And I appreciate the personal nature of it. I've got a daughter and a son as well. Yeah. And it's kind of natural for them to be really curious about the environment. We're always reading, they're younger than your kids. We're always reading books about animals, about nature. And I feel like we got to follow their lead sometimes, and we've got to do what we can to leave behind a world where they can thrive. But Dow got going early. It was in the late 90s, as I understand it, it was the late 90s when you committed to 10-year sustainability goals. And has that had an impact on company operations?
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, I was, it's funny, I've been with the company now 32, almost 30, this is my 33rd year. And I was there when they first started this idea of sustainability goals, right? So we've been now doing this for 3 decades. I mean, I think we've in our entire history have always thought about sustainability, reducing our energy consumption, trying to gain more yield with less inputs. But, I think that we really put us on the map when we said, hey, we are going to write down goals and we're going to hold ourselves accountable to them. And that made a pretty substantial impact on the company, pretty much changed our thinking considerably. And at the time we had about 50,000 employees spread all over the globe. But what was really important for them is to see that, top leadership support. So you will still see that today, extreme leadership in our C-suite about focusing on sustainability. So, what you saw also was that sustainability sort of broke the silos down, right? We saw that, we weren't just operating in this space, and this space, we were operating across. I think that was very, very important. So it was a great education for the team. We knew that we didn't have to we needed to focus on other things besides just our own footprint. So we saw these concentric circles, continue to expand. We committed to doing things like investing in energy efficiency. Over a decade, we reduced, our own direct emission footprint by over 20%. I mean, which for us was a big deal, especially in an energy intensive industry like ours. We saved $5 billion on our energy bill, and people started to see that, right? And they're looking at this and going, this kind of change and impact inspired our employee population. So now we have people constantly asking us, how can I get involved on that project? What is it that Dow is going to do next? And I think that has also come to realization that, us being more efficient, being more sustainable makes us more competitive. And sustainability for Dow is not just about the environmental piece of it, but it's really how you treat your employees, to how you treat your environment and everything in between. So it's an ecosystem. It's really an ecosystem.
I want to pick up on two things that you said. One is concentric circles. How do you use your experiences, which in which you're setting these goals, you're moving on these goals, and everybody's behind them, including all the leadership. How do you use those experiences to lead in the broader manufacturing community? Do you use them with your partners? Do you share those experiences with your partners? And then the second piece I want to pick up on is you mentioned the excitement that folks at Dow feel about this. And to me, that's the excitement that creates space for innovation. And are there lessons learned that that your employees are coming up with that are inspiring more sustainable behavior in other industries?
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk maybe about things like energy efficiency. You know, why was that so impactful for us, especially when we're talking about our manufacturing community? I mean, we talked about environmental, but also this economic benefit, right? And we saw that same opportunities were driving innovation approaches to new and emerging challenges. You know, we talked a bit about plastic waste. You know, we are working on that. Tangible example, in ASEAN, Dow has launched a plastic road initiative. And I know firsthand about the plastic road initiative because they put one in about 2 blocks from where I used to live, which was really cool, right? So we took hard recycled plastic, combined it with road asphalt, and all of a sudden you have a plastic road. And that provides, you know, really durable, sustainable road infrastructure. And we're doing it everywhere. I think that started in the ASEAN region. You know, we create all kinds of new models for recycled products. We're supporting, you know, the economic cycle really from waste collection and transport to recycling and then to final end product, right? So you're getting all kinds of industries involved, and we're sharing with them, right? How do we work with waste management companies to get that waste to a recycling center to get to a new final end project? And it generates a lot of commercial value. It supports jobs. I think that's a really great thing. It's the economics, and we were learning that, you know, all of these things provide the economic value of you know, our company. And then, you know, we've put down, like I said, we've done a lot of roads in Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and the Philippines, but we've also removed 30 tons of waste. I mean, so sustainable behavior, lessons learned. I mean, you know, and these are all things that we can, you know, repeat, right? We can just pick up and repeat. And I think that's great. And we also, you know, fundamentally, when we create value from a waste like this, it doesn't get into the environment. And I think that's a really important piece of all this.
The ASEAN countries, and I'm talking about Brunei as ASEAN chair, Thailand as chair of APEC this year, Indonesia as chair of G20. They're all talking about circular economy. They're different words that they're using for circular economy, but it all sounds to me pretty consistent with what you're talking about, making sure that waste goes into new products. You're getting rid of enormous amounts of waste by building plastic roads that are made from leftover plastic products. Do you see some of these trends being picked up in ASEAN and Asia, and are they different from other places? What do you see as opportunities for Dow and for its partners?
Yeah, you know, I think for Dow and ASEAN, you know, and really around the world, the vision of change really starts locally. I mean, we've seen this in many things, right? You know, we see our people and our communities getting together and saying, okay, look, we got to start the change right here where we live and work. And that really starts, we think, with education, really understanding problems and then in turn in collaborating. We're one of the reasons we believe, you know, this is one of the reasons, and we're so really proud that each of the countries that we operate in, you know, our teams have developed, you know, really targeted local efforts to engage those communities, and then especially schools to really educate. You mentioned circular economy, and that's one of our, you know, the big things that we work on from an education perspective. And, you know, if we can educate people on better environmental practices, then, you know, that's a win-win for everybody. A couple examples of this in Indonesia, you know, we've done some work piloting school curriculum And that's about taking plastic waste education and STEM skills and marrying them up. In the Philippines, we're developing circular economy curriculum for primary school level students that can be leveraged to all over the ASEAN region. We've also found that critical component of this is innovation, right? How do we work those things into creating programs where we create challenges so that we can see the ideas of young people? Like my kids, I love the ideas that they bring forward and all this. In Thailand and Vietnam, we've done that at the community level. We've partnered with the National Research Council of Thailand and the Vietnamese NGO Center for Environment and Community Research and other companies. We're collaborating with other recycling companies there to really put forward a model of segregation at source and to teach communities how to make outdoor construction materials from plastic waste. We're looking into paving blocks, concrete blocks, curbs, all kinds of low-value plastic waste that's in turn put into recycled pellets. And we've seen that plastic, can replace sand and stone materials, up to 10% in terms of replacing it in construction. I think that's really amazing. And again, it removes more waste from the environment and then puts it into productive use. So education in our communities at the local level and then building on people's and everyone's really creativity and the common goals for a healthier, safer planet are really very important to us.
Well, you mentioned Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam. I should note that these themes move from year to year, even as leadership changes in countries and changes in ASEAN. So I mentioned that Brunei had pushed this idea of a circular economy. Cambodia is doing that as ASEAN chair this year. It sounds like you've been invested in ASEAN for a long time, and
Yes.
Your experience in ASEAN is broad and deep. Could you share some lessons that Dow may have learned about how to be effective in operating and in driving change in ASEAN?
Yeah, I will say, I think that, we talk about partnership and collaboration. I think that for us is really important, right? It's in any region, but especially in this region is that, we really need to work with others to make sure that we can do all the things that we do. And government is an essential partner in that space. And we need, to work with them to identify projects and, help us promote, those projects for sustainability. Give you an example about Sports Singapore. And the National Environment Agency in Singapore were really very key partners for us in helping us approve the model of our shoe recycling project. Another example of us, working together and collaborating together to have better results. In this case, they supported infrastructure that would promote us to help collect shoes for recycling, which I think is really another creative opportunity. Goes back to the innovation and the creativity that we see at the local level, but then moving that to scale. And I think that's really important too. Governments can help us do that. In Thailand, we, is another great example of a partner on projects, not only, but that help us drive better policy, which I think is really good. Thailand is leading national strategy to address plastics pollution. They're doing it with strong engagement from industry. And I think that's really important. Developing roadmaps and action plans and actually doing things. One of the things I just also want to highlight is the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. I think, we are a founding member of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and they are very active in the ASEAN region. Dow and the Alliance are active partners in the Rayon Less Waste Project, which, as you may know, is a public-private collaboration to help develop, a community-based waste management system in Eastern Thailand. And their aim is really to enable collection and processing, because we know if we have the infrastructure to do that, we will see more plastic waste go to better use. I think this program has had tremendous support. Last fall, they announced an expansion of that, from less than 20 municipalities to now, well over 60, close to 70. I think that's absolutely wonderful. That whole idea of private and public sector coordination is really vital in us solving some of these issues. We've seen all kinds of circular economy, plastic waste management, public-private partnerships in Vietnam between the Ministry of Natural Resources and and Environment and Dow and 27 other companies. Again, great activities to synergize efforts and really see how that practical collaboration can really make things happen. And I think that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. We're very proud of the role that we've played at Dow as a driver of these things to really promote partnerships and really transform policy and how we can work together to get more things done.
And thank you for mentioning the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. I would note also a few months ago, US-ASEAN Business Council signed an MOU with the National Environment Agency of Singapore that you mentioned. The idea was to pursue projects that sounds like to do what Dow is already doing, pursue public-private collaboration wherever possible to deal with the challenge of waste and waste management. And it sounds to me like you're doing that in ASEAN country after ASEAN country. So there may be more contracts to be signed in the future, I hope. And if we can help make sure that they happen, we'd love to. I do think there's a hunger in ASEAN to take advantage of these kind of innovative solutions to waste management problems, as well as other environmental challenges. There's a hunger to deal with, for example, problems of air pollution in big cities like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City and Jakarta. So wherever our companies can step in and innovate and build capacity, I think it's wonderful. Is there anything that we can collectively do to scale up, to kind of accelerate these sorts of activities? And is there anything that the council can do to make sure that governments are working with us rather than that we're at cross purposes?
Yeah, I think just the idea of us collaborating with one another, where can we, work together? And we've had several examples that we've talked about just briefly here today, but I think that governments are so important. Councils like yours are so important to help us find each other sometimes. And then how do we work those really work those projects to scale? And what we see is great success when we do, right? When you talk about moving from 20 municipalities to almost 70, that's amazing. And it's in a very few short months. So we all see the value and we work together. I think that, all of a sudden it has a much greater impact.
I agree with you. So I understand you went to Glasgow for COP26. Yes. We're hoping to go to COP27. But can you give us some of your takeaways from the COP? Are you optimistic? Are we on a track that might lead us to implement some of the goals that were laid out at COP26? And what will you as a company focus on for COP27?
Yeah, well, COP26 was an experience. I had not been to a COP, and so I was very obviously I was very curious to go. But our participation as a company like that is extremely important. I mean, we really know and believe and firmly believe, and we embrace that responsibility to really work and decrease our emissions, right? And I think many in our industry feel the same way we do, and we know that we need to achieve net zero emissions because, as we've discussed, the planet can't handle anymore. So what I thought was really striking at COP26, and everywhere I went, and you're in the Blue Zone, you're in the Sustainability Innovation Center, companies were really central to the core of the conversation, and them making very, very clear commentary on what they were going to do for climate action, and it became very central to their strategy, right? So I think that was a big change. It was a big shift from what we've seen before. A company like Dow, in that particular case, we have plans to renew our entire manufacturing fleet, right, in a strategic way. You'll see that, we announced last October plans to build the first zero carbon ethylene and polyethylene complex in Canada. I mean, that's never been done, right? So this idea that, companies they're driving a stake in the ground and they're saying, look, it's not moving fast enough. We are committing and we're going to move this forward. I think that's really, really, really important. We also saw that public policy has to accelerate, right? countries can no longer ignore this, right? Even more, and we need to see that in concert with more action from the business sector. And I think we saw that from the business sector. And in fact, some people said at COP that, you know, businesses really outpaced the public policy piece of it. But we know that public policy is an extremely important part to driving change. An example for us, and one that I think that's really important, is this idea of carbon pricing. Effective
carbon price.
Yeah, carbon pricing. I mean, when you start putting a price on carbon, people will take action, right? Because it hits their pocketbook. I mean, I think it's very simple. And we see that as a very important piece of driving decarbonization. It also, I think, sets a level playing field. I think that, you know, what we see a lot of times is you may have a better environment in one part of the world than another. We need to level that playing field so that everyone understands, you know, first of all, foremost, the immediate action that needs to be taken, but also too that the economy or the economics of this are a bit more consistent. You know, I think also too what we saw is that a lot of companies really recognize the interrelationship at COP of things like circularity, biodiversity, and climate change, right? So all that, you know, works together, and you can't do one without the other. So if you can move towards a more circular economy, you will impact carbon emissions, and in turn, you're going to help us meet Paris Agreement targets. I think we would all say we still have a long way to go in this space, but I think that the drive of companies is something that I've never seen before, and we're going to see a lot of change over the next decade as a result.
So if I could kind of pluck out two key lessons from what you've described, it sounds like we've got to accelerate public policy. There's no substitute for that. Yet it can be, and sounds like it is increasingly, the private sector that's driving innovation, that's taking responsibility for making change, taking collective responsibility for making change, and in many cases leaning on government rather than the opposite. And that's probably a good dynamic where there's competition to do better. So companies leaning on governments, and governments sometimes in turn forcing or requiring companies to step up and help address common goals. So I take that as a positive dynamic. So
yeah, it was very positive dynamic, and I will tell you, I think that, you know, there are so many aspects to climate, you know, about where we need to, you know, bring the full weight to bear of both public policy and then the innovation and knowledge that we can bring in as far as the private sector. I think you're going to find that if we can marry those two together, it's going to be a force, you know, and we will achieve what we need to achieve in this space.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
There was a lot of discussion about how to manage indirect emissions. I'm told that the lingo is you've got scope 1 emissions and you've got scope 2 and 3 emissions. And how does Dow manage its indirect emissions, its scope 2 and 3 emissions? And how do you work with your partners, your supply chain partners, your industrial partners to ensure that the whole value chain is delivering against your targets? Are there any best practices that you could share with other companies?
Yeah, you know, I would absolutely agree. I mean, scope 2 and scope 3 reductions are essential, right? Scope 1, you know, we all, I think, have a really good handle on our scope 1 emissions. That's what comes out of our actual manufacturing, the ones we create. I think scope 2 and scope 3 can be a bit more difficult for us to deal with, especially scope 3. You know, but when we talk about scope 2, you know, this is about us growing our commitment to use more renewable energy, right? And I will tell you, for me, this has been a really a tremendous bright spot, and I get to work with the folks who do the renewable power discussion at Dow. We continue to be a top 20 global corporation using clean energy, and that may be surprising to some. We've added, you know, 132 megawatts of wind and solar this last year alone. I mean, so, you know, we have far exceeded our goal on this, and it has saved us 600,000 metric tons of CO2 annually. You know, and this is all over the globe. I mean, we do solar, we do wind, biomass, all kinds of different things. And I think that, you know, what that does is it, you know, brings our total access to that clean energy ahead of where we want to be. And I think that's exciting. And we continually are looking for renewable sources. And I think that's really important. Switching gears to scope 3, and my scope 3 emissions are somebody else's scope 1 and scope 2. So if we can all work on scope 1 and scope 2, scope 3 will, in essence, reduce also. But that's about 70% of our emissions, right? And better than half of those come from our use of raw materials, our transportation, and where we purchase services as a company. So we have a lot of work to do with our suppliers. And so we look at engaging our suppliers on a very different level now. In 2021, we went back to about 100, just a few over 100 of our suppliers, and we asked them if they can share with us what they do on climate change. And we learned all kinds of things. We learned that 90% of them report scope 1 emissions, 80% had set a reduction target, and the list went on and on. So we said, okay, we need to start a program to really engage with our suppliers on a much different level. I mean, we have the desire now to set scope 3 targets very differently than we have before. But first we got to engage all those people who help us create scope 3 emissions. So this year, our goal is to engage 500 suppliers. And for us, that's a lot, right? Up from 100 last year. So we want to add 400 new ones this year to have them look at, okay, do you have a reduction goal? How do you look at your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions? Can we work together? I think that's another thing. We had a call, today's Thursday, yesterday, with a company that we work with, and they wanted to talk with us about renewable energy and how could they make their projects or their operations more efficient. It was an excellent call, but that's the collaboration that will help us to reduce our scope 3 emissions. So, we use the data from our suppliers to engage them and then collaborate with them. And then also look at one another and say, okay, how can we talk about this as far as our ESG performance? And then, how can we award that, award that good performance and then seek improvement with where we need to. So I think it's really important. It's also important for Dow that, we manage those relationships productively. And I think that's been a really, I would say, a very hallmark to this process. And we've recently been recognized by the Climate Disclosure Project on the way we work with our suppliers. So I think that's pretty cool too. So a lot of work here yet to go. But again, key themes of collaboration, working together. How do we scale up? How do we make a bigger difference working with one another? So it's in everything that we do in the sustainability space.
Well, the other key theme that I'm hearing is ripple effects. Once you set really ambitious targets and you show your suppliers how serious you are about it, well, then people are going to step up. It's not an accident that they're 80 or 90% already have their own goals and are pursuing their own goals. They're hearing you, and you're key to their success. They know that you're dead serious about achieving your goals. And so the ripple effects, I think, are massive. And when you go from 100 suppliers to 500 suppliers, you're talking about really big ripple effects. So I think that's awesome.
It's really fun. It's really fun too. We learn from our suppliers, which I think is also a really cool part of this, right? So we learn from them, they learn from us, everybody wins.
That's kind of the definition of collaboration. And that keeps coming up in this discussion, is a commitment to collaboration and partnership. At the United Nations level, I know the Council has been working with friends at Dow on following the outcomes of the recent meeting of the United Nations Environment Assembly just a few weeks ago. Wow. There are a lot of discussions around a global plastics treaty. What do you think? What's your assessment at this stage?
Yeah, so we've been really strong in this process. I know that we talked a little bit about this through ICCA, a bunch of other, quite a few other different groups, World Plastics Council. I mean, I think that we really need to all support, a global plastics producers resolution towards that agreement about the challenge of plastic waste in the environment. I think we all need to, again, here's the collaboration team coming back, working together to get the best possible end result. We continue to remain a strong advocate for legally binding global agreement to eliminate plastic waste. I mean, I think that's, we've been very clear about that in a hallmark. And we participated in the UNEA 5 negotiations in Nairobi. I mean, we were a delegate of the ICCA, or International Council of Chemical Associations. And as an observer, we were able to really see and be part of the conversation. We applaud, a lot of the governments for adopting resolutions to create the International Negotiating Committee. I think this is really important that, again, a collaborative body that's going to help us look at getting to an agreement on tackling plastic pollution once and for all. And I think that's very important. A global agreement like that, as we've seen, can help scale. It can mobilize funding, investment, et cetera, get people behind kind of something that's, a fit for purpose national waste management program. And then in turn, it helps, reduce the leakage and then get, the circular economy for plastics where it needs to be. So there isn't really no single approach here also too. I think that was one of the things that we found during the discussion is that, there isn't just one approach, but we have to look at this as what are the tenets and then decide, how we're going to move this forward. We're pretty pleased with what we saw come out of it from a language perspective. Technologies need to be considered, right? And they need to address that full life cycle of plastics. I think that, we have that as part of our innovation and value chain review that we're doing. We want to increase both the recyclability of our packaging, which is part of, one of our goals is to make sure that all of our packaging can be recycled. And that's can be a really hard thing when you're talking about multi-layer plastics. And then to really improve the access to recycling technology. I think this is one thing around the globe that it's all over the map. In many nations, recycling is not something that people do normally, and there isn't the infrastructure to do that. So I think we would support investments in that, and we're glad to see that was part of the conversation in UNEA. The next steps we know is that the International Negotiating Committee is going to proceed with further meetings and discussions. We will be anxious to be part of that discussion, and we really want to continue to engage in that negotiating process to get to a real global agreement to address plastic pollution that we can all work together to do. So very important part of our work in sustainability and circularity.
This goes back to what you said about the importance of accelerating policy. And
Yes.
An effective global plastics treaty is the common goal. And I'm glad that Dow is so engaged in getting it to a place where it's effective. If you look back in history, when we did the Montreal Treaty on Ozone, it changed the course of history. So these are not insignificant policy steps. These are major policy steps that have impacts for generations. So thanks for your work on that. We also appreciate, I just want to add, we also appreciate the ASEAN, Council and everyone really saying, hey, we want to stay engaged in this process. We're looking at all of you to help us stay engaged in that process and take a leadership role in promoting that agreement, so to get to drive meaningful change. So really important part of that we all work together. Well, it's a simple, it's simple math. If we come in as an industry and you say, multiple companies are interested in this, we're more effective than going in company by company by company. And that's what we're able to add, is that sort of convening authority, that, bringing companies together and then speaking with one voice, because it makes us really effective. And our goal is to get stuff done. And when we can facilitate getting stuff done, we're super happy about it.
Absolutely.
I want to leave time for questions from the audience. So if anybody has them, put them up in the chat. But I do have a few more questions while people are thinking about their questions. You've announced that you have news that you're going to retire as Dow's CSO.
Yes.
What caused you to make this decision, and what are your plans going forward?
Yeah, so yes, I'll be retiring at the end of April. It's been an honor and really a privilege to sit in this chair for the last 3 years. I will tell, my husband and I have talked quite a bit about what's right for us, and the time is just right for us. I mean, new adventures await, and I think that, my successor's coming in, Andre Argenton, who's an amazing individual who's going to take sustainability to new levels at Dow. And, for us, it was, like I say, it was just about, us trying something new. So very excited about that. And, in our plans forward are really the first 6 months, we've got to get our daughter to graduate school. My husband's mother is getting married. She's 77 and she's getting married. So we're very excited for her and for her fiance. So a lot of really exciting things in the family, but also looking at enjoying ourselves just a little bit more.
I hear you. These moments of transition can also be moments of reflection.
Right.
When we shift priorities, whether it's as a result of what's happening in the family or the pandemic or whatever it is, causing us to think about what's the next phase. It sometimes helps us reflect. And so if you were to talk to your 25-year-old self or your daughter, your 25-year-old daughter, who sounds like she's pursuing a career that's going to very much involve sustainability, what would be the advice that you'd give?
Yeah, well, I've had people ask me this before, and I said, be bold and don't be afraid. Those are the two things I would say. And with Melissa, our daughter, I am so proud that she's not afraid, right? She's not afraid. And I think sometimes women, like they shy away from challenges for whatever reason, because they might be a little afraid or not as confident, or may feel that they're not as qualified. There's always going to be something that's harder than what you thought, right? But you'll get through it. So if I would say, hey, Melissa, go for it. Just always go for it. And I'm lucky that she has. And when she doesn't feel like she can, she picks up the phone and she calls her mom and we have a discussion. But be bold. Don't be afraid. You can do it.
I love that. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and she's not afraid. In fact, she loves math. She's been she talks with me all the time about math. I'm not particularly good at math, but I'm embracing this challenge to kind of go with her on her journey. I think it's no secret that it's sometimes harder for women in STEM, that
Yes.
the numbers aren't as high for women in science, technology, engineering, and math. And that's an opportunity missed. I would just note we as part of our sustainability efforts, like we see this on a spectrum, and it's also how you deal with your employees, how you deal with social issues. So we've just released a major report on women's economic empowerment in ASEAN, and the bottom line is, the economic case is really strong. Inclusion is beneficial to the bottom line. Inclusion leads to economic growth. It's not just doing the right thing, it's doing the economically
Absolutely.
sensible thing. What can we as industry do to create more opportunities for women?
Yeah, and if you haven't read the report, for those of you on the phone, I would go read it. I've read it a couple of times now, and it's really striking, the data in the report, and what you can do to create opportunities for women, right? How do you train women? How do you teach women how to navigate things like trade? I mean, it was really, it's an excellent summary of that. So what do? I mean, we have to create an enabling environment for women, right? And it's not just about, feeling good or what have you, but it's about really using the talent that we see. I think that one of the things that's really important is us also, your daughter's really great at math. I hope that no one tells her she's not at some point, right? Breaking the bias about what women can do and not do. We have to give people opportunities to succeed, which means you have to also, I think, when you look at someone, look for the skill set that they have and those strengths that they have, and help them really nurture them. I have some really great people that I work with that are unbelievable strategists that are women, But, sometimes they just don't think like the rest of us do it now, right? And they're amazing. I really am so excited that they're on my team because I really understand what they bring to the table, right? And we need to surround ourselves with people that don't think like us, but also to can help us, I would say, push ourselves and innovate and think creatively past anything that we've ever thought possible. But it starts with all of us being allies, giving opportunity to other women, and really encouraging people to just go and achieve. And I think that you've done a wonderful job in your report about giving us very tangible items that we can all go do to help women advance. And I think tremendous opportunity in the ASEAN region to do so if you do what the report asks.
Well, and to me, the really cool thing about the report is that we have all these great case studies. It's like what you were describing at COP. It's companies taking the lead in this area and doing innovative things to advance in inclusion goals. And yes. I think there are half a dozen case studies in there. Each of them are super tangible things that companies have done that have created economic opportunities for women where they hadn't existed before. And I hope that sparks a conversation and gives other companies ideas about what they might do. Have you, in your experience at Dow, have you run into obstacles, gender-based obstacles? And what's your advice to those who do, how to overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, so I started at Dow 30 years ago. The company is very different from, I signed my employee agreement in 1989, right? So now it's 2022. It's a very different company. And I would say that, I've experienced some really weird things over the 30 years that I've been at Dow, from an inclusion and diversity perspective. But what I've been really inspired by, and I would even say in the last even 10 years, is just Dow's absolute firm belief in improving inclusion at all levels of the company, meaning that we are taking action and we're not just giving it, frankly, lip service, but we're doing it. So my advice to folks about inclusion and diversity is get on board. It's going to get you the best talent that you've ever imagined. You will be a more productive and more profitable company because you have a diversity of thought, a diversity of people. It's like sustainability, one of the top two things that talent is looking for when they're interviewing you and as a company. And I mean, when you think about the war on talent that we're in now, if you're not talking about inclusive practices and you're not talking about sustainable practices, you will not get the best people. And I will take my daughter's advice. She says, Mom, I'm not going to work for a company that's not equally balanced in men and women. And she will follow through on that. So a lot of opportunity here. I'm very proud to say Dow has advanced its sustainability practices and has been given tremendous amount of accolades over the last 5 years. One of my, I would say, friends, and I really use that term friends and colleagues, Karen S. Carter, has been a force for Dow in this space. I mean, she has really helped us move the needle. And we know we have a long way to go yet. And I think that, we have many, many things that we will still do, but so very proud to be at a company who values diversity of thought, who looks at this as a differentiating factor and is actually doing something about it. So very exciting.
Well, I think it helps you attract talent. And
Absolutely.
And I love it that you're listening to your daughter's advice, not only the other way around.
She's my reverse mentor. She's my reverse mentor.
It's a good lesson. The wisdom can come in a lot of directions. I wanted to give Dylan an opportunity to ask a question. And I see Lisa and Christy, who are friends and forces. So over to you, Dylan, to manage questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Ted. I had one quick comment on something earlier, and then a question. Since we mentioned our MOU partner, the National Environment Agency of Singapore, I did want to flag that they're hosting their Clean Enviro Summit in Singapore coming up April 17th to 21st. We've been talking with them quite a bit about how to really bring more private sector voices to that summit and showcase some of the innovative sustainability work that our members, but really, beyond our membership, are doing. It sounds like a good opportunity to really interact with policymakers in Asia and Europe and the United States as well. But I did want to ask a question, kind of going back to the theme of, what would you tell your younger self, or what would you tell someone starting out, in a career in college right now? Over the past few years, we've really seen this sustainability space explode, and I feel like the word sustainability is tacked on to just about every job you can imagine now. Analyst, consultant, accountant, auditor, and I'm curious. You mentioned a little bit about what Dow's doing in Southeast Asia to educate people and work on curriculums. Where would you highlight the greatest focus in terms of education and sustainability? Do you think we need more scientists, more innovators to come up with innovative new technology? Or do you think there's more of a gap in sort of the public administration, public policy space, or somewhere else? But really, where would be the gap that you would tell a young person, you should focus on this in school, this is going to be the future for you?
Yeah, Dylan, I would say both. I mean, to me, those are both really great. If you think about technology, we will need technology that's not invented yet to solve the issues that we're facing in sustainability. And so, everyone who's coming through our system, I think about the graduate work that my daughter's going to pursue in agriculture. I mean, she's going to be inventing the next innovation that's going to, raise the bar, continually raise the bar. So, I would say innovation and technology. If you like math, right, Ambassador, go like math. And we need you. We need you. We need every single person who has that interest. And we need people in public policy too. I think that, if you look at some of how our governments now are approaching sustainability or, practices in sustainability, it's because they've had a catalyst for change, right? Somebody who's come in who has a passion for that particular topic, or, they've seen that, we need to change how we do things because this is not how it's going to be. So I think that we have to have people in our public policy realm that are going to push the envelope, right? And they're going to listen and want to collaborate with private sector, with public sector, with the NGO community, and triangulate that and bring us all together for best possible end result. So I think you need people in both. That
makes sense. I agree. And I do see we have one question. It's asking for the top 3 things that's happened in your sustainability journey that you will never forget. Maybe in the interest of time, we'll limit it to maybe the top 1.
Okay, so I'll give you the top 1.
Sure.
So it might be a little bit, and my colleagues on the phone have heard me tell you the story before, but when we started the Nature Goal, our executive vice president for manufacturing basically said to me, there's no way that you're going to meet this goal. And our nature goal is a big one, right? To get $1 billion worth of value by better decisions for nature and business. Well, the first year we did pretty well. We got maybe less than 100 million. The next year we got 100 million. The third year we got another 100 million. And I will never forget the day that we were on a call and he said to me, I didn't believe you, Mary. I didn't believe you that we could do this, but now I do. And I thought, yes, we did it.
Yes.
And that really, I think for me, it was a very small thing, but we converted him. And for me, that was a big deal. And in turn, we saw the whole organization really start to morph and come together. So that was one of the things I won't soon forget.
Thank you for sharing that story with us. I know
$1 billion goal is a big it's a big goal.
It's a big one. And we're well
Pretty
over
awesome.
600 million and counting. I have no doubt we'll exceed it.
Yay. Fantastic.
Sort of like the moonshot, when we committed to that, we didn't know that we could actually do that. And it gave us something to work towards and made it even more special when we actually accomplished it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're just about out of time. So, I will just say a couple words to close things out. First of all, Mary, thank you so much for joining us and having this great conversation with Ambassador Osius. Thank you to our members and colleagues and friends who joined us on the call. I will just say this was recorded. It will be available on our LinkedIn if you missed any part of this, or you just thought that was so great and you wanted to share it with your colleagues. It will be available on our US-ASEAN Business Council page. So we hope more people get to see this, and we'll also have more programs like this later on in the year. So definitely stay tuned for that. And as Mary mentioned, really appreciate your kind words about our report, Bridging the Gap, Advancing Equal Opportunities and Gender Equality in ASEAN. I dropped a link in the chat, but we will definitely be sharing that more throughout the year and beyond. So looking forward to more engagements like this, and really, again, thank you, Mary, and thanks, Dow, for allowing us to have so much of your time today.
Yeah, Dylan, it was great. And Ambassador, thank you. It was wonderful, wonderful conversation today.
No, let me thank you. And I mean, we thank you first for your time today, but even more than that for these accomplishments that have made the world better. Thanks for leaning in. Thanks for being bold, because you would have done fine professionally by not being bold, but you didn't settle for that. So I think that sets a great example for our daughters.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
our sons, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
thanks so much. Really great to talk with you.